My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. My son calls once a month, but I can hear the obligation in his voice, that hollow politeness you use with strangers. Last week, I found a letter my daughter wrote to her therapist when she was 16. She'd hidden it in her old jewelry box, and I was cleaning out her room, finally accepting she's never coming back home. The letter said, "I wish my parents would just get divorced already. Their fake happiness is suffocating me. I can't breathe in this house." I read those words sitting on her bed, surrounded by the remnants of a childhood I thought I had protected. The ceramic horses she collected, the participation ribbons, the photos of family vacations where we all smiled with our mouths but not our eyes. I had stayed for her, for both of them. 30 years of staying for them, and she was begging the universe for me to leave. The taste of that realization is still metallic in my mouth, like biting down on aluminum foil. I married David when I was 22. He was charming then, the kind of man who could make a waitress laugh and remember your anniversary at the same time. But charm, I learned, is just performance. And performers get tired. The first time he screamed at me, really screamed, was 6 months after our wedding. I had forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning, and suddenly I was worthless. Stupid, a disappointment. I stood in our kitchen, still wearing the yellow dress I thought looked pretty that morning, and felt something inside me go quiet, not dead, just quiet, like a radio being turned down but never off. Sarah was born 2 years later, then Michael 18 months after that, and David became a different person entirely. Not all the time. That's what made it so confusing. He could still be the man I married, bringing me coffee in bed on Sundays, playing airplane with the babies, kissing my forehead when I was tired. But those moments became islands in an ocean of walking on eggshells. The children learned to read his moods before I did. I would find them hiding in Sarah's closet when his car pulled into the driveway, their little faces tight with a fear they were too young to name. "Daddy's tired," I would tell them. "Let's be extra quiet tonight." I became a translator between their father and their childhood. When he criticized Sarah's drawing, I would find her later and tell her it was beautiful. When he called Michael soft for crying, I would hold my son in the bathroom and whisper that feelings were brave. I thought I was protecting them. I thought I was a shield between their innocence and his anger. But children aren't stupid. They see everything. They absorb everything. Sarah learned that love meant accepting cruelty with a smile. Michael learned that his emotions were weaknesses to be hidden. They both learned that this was what a marriage looked like. Two people trapped in a performance, pretending everything was fine while the house slowly filled with poison gas. The school counselor called when Sarah was 14. She'd been cutting herself, tiny precise lines on her hip where no one would see. When I asked her why, she looked at me with eyes that seemed 1,000 years old and said, "I don't know how else to feel something real. I should have left then. God, I should have left then." But the therapist said family stability was important. David promised to change. And I was scared of being alone, scared of admitting that the last 15 years had been a waste, scared of breaking apart the only life I knew, even if that life was slowly killing all of us. So I stayed. I scheduled family therapy sessions that David would attend for exactly 3 appointments before finding excuses. I bought self-help books that gathered dust on my nightstand. I perfected the art of making normal conversation at dinner while my stomach churned with anxiety about what might set him off. The silence in our house became a living thing. It lived in the space between David's words and his tone. It lived in the way the children would freeze when they heard his key in the door. It lived in the space between who I used to be and who I had become. A woman who apologized for existing, who asked permission to buy groceries, who had forgotten what her own voice sounded like when it wasn't soothing or explaining or defending. Michael started acting out at school when he was 12, fighting, failing classes. The teachers said he was angry, but I knew better. He wasn't angry. He was drowning. He had learned from watching me that problems were things you swallowed, emotions were things you hid, and asking for help was a luxury we couldn't afford. Sarah went the opposite direction. She became perfect, Straight A's, student council, volunteer work. She learned that if she could just be good enough, maybe the chaos would stop. She carried our family's dysfunction on her teenage shoulders like Atlas carrying the world, and I let her do it because I was too tired to carry it myself. The house felt like a mausoleum where we were all slowly dying, but dying quietly so the neighbors wouldn't complain. I told myself I was keeping the family together, but you can't keep something together that was never whole to begin with. You can only hold the broken pieces in place until your hands start bleeding. The breaking point came on Sarah's 18th birthday. We were having dinner at her favorite restaurant, another one of our carefully choreographed performances of family happiness. David made some comment about her college choices, something dismissive and cruel disguised as concern. And Sarah just stood up, looked at both of us and said, "I'm done pretending this is normal. You two have been torturing each other for my entire life, and you think you're protecting me. You're not. You're teaching me that this is what love looks like, and I'm never, ever going to love like this." She walked out, just walked out of the restaurant, out of our lives. She moved in with her friend's family until college started, and she's been running from us ever since. Michael left for college 2 years later and never moved back home. He lives 3 states away now, has a girlfriend he's never introduced to us, a life we know nothing about. He built his entire adult existence around the principle of being nothing like his parents. And me, I finally left David 3 years ago. Not because I was brave, because I was finally more afraid of staying than leaving. He didn't fight for me, didn't even seem surprised. Maybe he was as tired of the performance as I was. I live in a small apartment now. I have plants that I water because I want to, not because someone will criticize me if they die. I eat dinner at 6 instead of waiting until 8:30 for David to come home in whatever mood would determine the evening's emotional weather. I sleep without listening for footsteps, without calculating whether it's safe to turn the pages of my book or if the sound might trigger an argument about inconsiderate behavior. For the first time in 30 years, I am not walking on eggshells. But my children learned to walk on eggshells from me. They learned that love meant sacrifice without boundaries, that family meant obligation without joy, that happiness was something you performed rather than felt. Sarah is 28 now and has never had a relationship that lasted longer than 6 months. She calls it not being the settling type, but I know better. She doesn't trust love because love in our house was indistinguishable from suffering. Michael is engaged to a wonderful woman who has been patient with his emotional walls, but he tells me he has panic attacks about becoming like his father. He's so afraid of causing harm that he barely allows himself to take up space. That's my legacy. 2 beautiful, intelligent, capable adults who learned from my example that love meant enduring hell, Bayou. With a smile. That protecting your children meant modeling dysfunction, that staying together was more important than being whole. The letter I found in Sarah's jewelry box wasn't the only thing she'd written. There were others. Diary entries from high school where she described feeling like she was living in a museum of misery, where she wrote about wondering if normal families existed or if everyone was just pretending like we were. She wrote about watching other kids interact with their parents and feeling like she was seeing something from another planet. She wrote about promising herself she would never, ever create a home that felt like ours. I used to think I was a martyr, a woman who sacrificed her happiness for her children's stability, but martyrdom is just self-destruction with better PR. I wasn't protecting my children by staying in a toxic marriage. I was teaching them that toxicity was normal, that they didn't deserve better, that their needs didn't matter as much as maintaining the facade. If I could go back, I would leave on that first day he screamed at me in the kitchen. I would pack our things while he was at work and drive to my sister's house and figure it out from there. I would show my children that love doesn't require you to disappear, that family doesn't mean accepting cruelty, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. But I can't go back. I can only sit here at 60 in my small apartment with my thriving plants and understand that the thing I was most afraid of, breaking up my family, I did anyway. just slowly, over decades, with intention. I broke my family by keeping it together. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to show them what it looks like to choose yourself, to refuse to accept less than you deserve, to demonstrate that happiness isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the best way to save your family is to save yourself first, even if it means admitting you spent 30 years doing it wrong. And even if it means your children may never forgive you for waiting so long to learn what love actually looks like when it's not performing for an audience that stopped believing the show years ago.